You've entered Void of Rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple. Subscribe. We're almost at 10,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's jump into today's story. They say confession is good for the soul. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the soul has to be torn apart before it can be made whole again. My name is Andrew Kane, and if you're hearing this recording, then you already know how this ends. But you don't know how it began in an abandoned theater on Chicago's South Side, where I met something that called itself Lucifer and learned that hell isn't a place you go when you die. It's a place you build for yourself, one buried truth at a time. 6 weeks before that midnight encounter, I woke up screaming for the 42nd night in a row. The clock on my nightstand glowed 3:33 in the morning, same as always, and my sheets were soaked through with sweat that smelled faintly of sulfur. The nightmare was always identical. A courtroom stretching into infinity, empty except for me. And somewhere in that vast darkness, someone screaming my name with a desperation that made my bones ache. I never saw who it was, I never needed to. Deep down, in that place where we keep the truths we can't face, I already knew. I stumbled to my kitchen and poured 3 fingers of scotch, my hands shaking badly enough that I spilled some on the marble counter. The apartment around me was everything I'd worked for since I was a kid in Cicero, watching my parents struggle. 40th floor overlooking Lake Michigan, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that cost more than my father made in a year. At 38, I was a partner at Hartman & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious defense firms. 28 consecutive courtroom victories, a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, effective. I should have been on top of the world. But instead I was standing in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, drinking scotch and trying not to look at my own reflection in the dark windows because something about it seemed wrong, like the image was moving just a fraction of a second behind my actual movements. The apartment felt different in those pre-dawn hours, like it knew my secrets and was judging me for them. Every shadow seemed deeper than it should be. Every creak of the building settling sounded like footsteps, approaching. I started leaving lights on when I slept, all of them burning electricity, like I could somehow keep the darkness at bay with enough wattage. My electricity bill had tripled. I didn't care. Darkness meant dreams, and dreams meant facing what I'd done. The birds started appearing that morning. I found them when I opened my balcony door to let in some air. 7 dead sparrows, arranged in a perfect circle, their heads all pointing toward my sliding glass door. Building maintenance cleaned them up when I called, the super muttering something about hawks, but his eyes said he didn't believe it. Neither did I. The next morning, there were more, 11 this time, and the sulfur smell was stronger, clinging to my clothes even after I showered twice. By the 3rd morning, I stopped counting. They just kept appearing, fresh every dawn, like some kind of offering or warning I couldn't decipher. My brother Alex called that evening during our weekly check-in, and I almost told him everything. Alex was 6 years younger, but had always been the steady one. The one who chose teaching music to high school kids over making money, who found peace in simple things while I chased after something I couldn't name. "You sound terrible," he said, concern threading through his voice. "When did you last sleep through the night?" I lied and said I was fine, just a busy caseload, because how do you tell someone that you're being haunted by a decision you made 8 years ago? A decision that seemed so small at the time but has grown into something monstrous that follows you through every waking moment and invades your dreams like poison. "Andrew, I'm serious," Alex pressed. "You've been off for months now. Every time we talk, you sound more exhausted, more distant. Are you drinking too much?" The question hit close enough to home that I almost confessed everything right there, over the phone at 7:30 on a Sunday evening, while he was probably grading papers or preparing lesson plans for his Monday classes. "I'm handling it," I said instead, which was such an obvious lie that even I didn't believe it. "Just a tough case. It'll be over soon." That part at least turned out to be true, though not in any way I could have anticipated. Thursday night, every smoke alarm in my apartment went off at 2 a.m. The fire department found nothing. No electrical problems. No explanation. The battalion chief, a grey-haired man with tired eyes, lingered at my door after his crew left. "You okay, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told him I was fine, but after he left I sat on my couch until dawn, every light in the apartment blazing, because I knew something was coming for me, and pretending otherwise had stopped working. I called in sick to work that Friday for the first time in 5 years. Alexis left 3 voicemails asking if I was alright, if I needed anything, but I couldn't bring myself to call her back. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of scotch on my laptop, researching things I'd tried to forget. Demonology, supernatural encounters, stories of people who'd made deals they regretted. The internet is full of crazy things, conspiracy theories and supernatural claims, most of it obvious nonsense, but some of it rang true in a way that made my skin crawl. Stories of people being haunted by their choices, pursued by forces they couldn't explain, driven to confession by entities that knew their secrets. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was a lawyer, a rational man who dealt in facts and evidence. But rationality doesn't mean much when you're waking up at 3:33 every morning to the smell of sulphur and your own screaming. The envelope arrived at my office on the following Friday, hand-delivered, though security had no record of anyone coming through the lobby. My colleague, Alexis Morgan, brought it to me during a break in depositions, her expression uncertain. We'd worked together for 6 years, tried a dozen cases side by side, and she could read me better than anyone, except Alex. The envelope was expensive cream paper, my name written across it in calligraphy, so perfect it looked printed, except for the slight variations that proved it wasn't. Inside was a single card with a message that stopped my heart. "We need to discuss your client, Orlando Mitchell." I must have made a sound because Alexis was suddenly beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Andrew, what is it?" But I couldn't answer because Orlando Mitchell was a name I'd spent 8 years trying to forget, a name that lived in that dark place inside me, where all the terrible truths hide, and now it was here in my office, written in elegant script by someone who knew what I'd done. I told Alexis it was nothing, just some crank from a disgruntled family member, but my voice shook, and she didn't believe me. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't have believed me either. "This is about the Mitchell case, isn't it?" Alexis said quietly. She was too smart, had always been too smart, and I could see her mind working through possibilities. "Andrew, that case was 8 years ago. You won. Mitchell was acquitted. Why would someone be contacting you about it now?" I wanted to tell her, wanted to confess everything right there in my office with the city spread out below us and the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not to her. "It's nothing," I said again. "Just someone trying to stir up trouble. Probably a family member who never accepted the verdict." She looked at me for a long moment, and I knew she didn't believe me, but she was too good a friend to push. "Okay," she said finally. "But if you need anything, if something's wrong, you know I'm here, right?" I nodded and thanked her and watched her leave. And the moment the door closed, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the bottle of bourbon I kept hidden there for late nights. That night, I pulled up the archived newspaper articles I'd forbidden myself from reading. Orlando Mitchell, acquitted of armed robbery and assault in 2015. Defense attorney Andrew Kane, securing not guilty verdict despite compelling evidence. And then the follow-up 6 months later. Orlando Mitchell arrested for murder during liquor store robbery. Victim Miguel Santos dead at scene. Suspect confesses. Life without parole. I'd made myself stop reading about it back then, convinced myself it wasn't my fault, that I'd just done my job in the first trial, and what happened after wasn't on me. But at 3 a.m, with my 4th scotch and the sulphur smell creeping back into my apartment, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I'd known. I'd always known. The articles included photographs. Orlando at 22, baby-faced and scared during his first trial, wearing a suit that didn't fit right and looking at the camera, with eyes that still held hope. Orlando at 23 being led away in chains after his murder conviction, those same eyes now dead and empty, all the hope burned out of them. And Miguel Santos, the man he'd killed, smiling in a family photo, his arms around 3 beautiful children and a wife who looked at him like he was her whole world. I stared at that photograph until my vision blurred, memorizing every detail. The daughter who looked about 15, the son who was maybe 10, the little girl who couldn't have been more than 6. These were the people whose lives had been destroyed by what I'd done, or more accurately, by what I'd failed to do. There was another article I'd missed before, published a year after Miguel's death. An interview with his widow, Carmen Santos, talking about how her husband had been working double shifts to save money for their daughter's quinceañera, how he'd taken the late shift at the liquor store as a favour to a co-worker who wanted to attend his son's baseball game. Miguel was always helping people, Carmen said in the article. He'd give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. He didn't deserve to die like that. He didn't deserve to die at all. The journalist had asked if she'd found any peace in Orlando's conviction, and her response made my blood run cold. There's no peace when the system fails you twice. My husband died because someone who should have been in prison was walking free. That's not justice, that's just more tragedy. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment, the only light coming from the city below, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. Not just to Orlando, though that was bad enough, but to Miguel Santos, who died because I'd been too cowardly to present evidence that would have kept Orlando off the streets. To Carmen Santos, who'd lost her husband because I'd chosen my career over the truth. To 3 children who'd grown up without a father, because I'd been afraid of losing a case. The weight of it was crushing, physically painful, like someone was sitting on my chest. The envelopes came every day after that, appearing in impossible places, tucked under my car's windshield wiper in the firm's secured parking garage, slipped into my briefcase while I was in court, waiting on my kitchen counter when I got home even though my door was locked and the security cameras showed no one entering. Each message was brief and increasingly personal. Monday, truth has a way of surfacing. Tuesday, the innocent don't rest easy. Wednesday, do you remember what you buried? Thursday, justice is patient, but not eternal. And Friday, the one that made me cancel my flight to Vancouver and accept that running wouldn't work. Midnight, the Ebony Rose Theater. Come alone. This is your last chance to choose truth over cowardice. I spent that final Friday in a state of mounting panic. I tried to work, tried to focus on a brief I was writing for an upcoming trial, but the words swam on the page. Every time I looked up, I expected to see someone standing in my office doorway watching me with knowing eyes. Alexis stopped by around 3 to check on me. "You look awful," she said bluntly. "Have you eaten anything today?" I couldn't remember. Food had seemed irrelevant. "I'm fine," I said automatically. She crossed her arms and gave me the look she usually reserved for hostile witnesses. "No, you're not. You're not fine. You haven't been fine in weeks, maybe months. Whatever's going on, whatever this is about, you need to deal with it before it destroys you." "What if it should destroy me?" I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. "What if I deserve it?" Alexis looked shocked, then concerned. Then something like understanding crossed her face. "The Mitchell case," she said softly. "This is really about the Mitchell case, isn't it? Andrew, what happened? What did you do?" But I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Not until I'd faced whatever was waiting for me at the Ebony Rose Theater. "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "I have to go deal with something." "Now? It's Friday afternoon. We have the Morrison deposition on Monday. You need to prepare." "I know. I'll be ready. I just have to do this first." She watched me gather my things with worried eyes. "Be careful," she said as I left, and something about the way she said it made me think she understood more than she was letting on. I knew the Ebony Rose, everyone in Chicago did if they'd lived here long enough. Built in 1928 during the theatre boom, it had been magnificent once. Art Deco masterpiece, golden fixtures, velvet and marble and beauty. Josephine Baker had sung there, Duke Ellington had played, and for 3 decades it was the crown jewel of the South Side. But neighbourhoods change and money moves, and by the 90s it was just another abandoned building, waiting for demolition, condemned and forgotten behind chain-link fencing, a monument to glory that couldn't last. Whoever was sending these messages wanted me there at midnight on Friday, and despite every rational instinct screaming at me to call the police or leave town or do anything except comply, I knew I was going to go. Some debts can't be outrun, and I've been running for 8 years. I spent the hours before midnight driving aimlessly through Chicago, watching the city transform from the bright bustle of evening into the darker, quieter hours of late night. I drove past my old apartment in Cicero, the cramped 3-room place where I'd grown up sharing a bedroom with Alex, where my parents had worked themselves to exhaustion trying to give us better lives. I drove past Northwestern's law school, where I'd studied until 2 in the morning most nights, convinced that working harder than everyone else would be enough, that success would feel like vindication for all the sacrifices. I drove past the courthouse where I'd won my first case, where I'd felt like I was finally becoming someone, finally escaping the limitations of my childhood. And I drove past Hartman and Associates, the glass tower where I'd built my career on lies and suppressed evidence, and the willingness to do whatever it took to win. At 11:30 I stopped at a 24-hour diner and ordered coffee I didn't drink. The waitress, a tired woman in her 50s with kind eyes, refilled my cup 3 times without asking. "You okay, honey?" she finally said. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." "Maybe I am," I said, and she patted my shoulder with maternal concern. "Well, whatever it is, facing it is better than running from it. Trust me on that one. I spent 20 years running from my mistakes, and they just got heavier." I thanked her and left a $100 tip, which made her eyes widen in shock, and drove to the Ebony Rose Theater, arriving at 11:45. I sat in my car across the street, filming myself on my phone, like some kind of insurance policy, my voice barely steady as I whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing here, but I can't run anymore. If something happens to me, this is all backed up, my password is." But I stopped because what was I even doing? I was a lawyer, a rational man who dealt in evidence and precedent and facts, not someone who went to abandoned theatres at midnight because mysterious notes told him to. Except I got out of the car anyway because being rational hadn't stopped the nightmares or the birds or the feeling that something with ancient eyes was watching me, waiting for me to finally face what I'd done. The street was empty, which seemed wrong for Chicago even at this hour. No cars passing, no pedestrians. No sound except my own footsteps and the distant wail of a siren somewhere to the north. The air felt thick, heavy with moisture and that sulphur smell that had been haunting me for weeks, and as I approached the theatre, I felt the temperature drop, saw my breath misting in front of me, even though it was late July and had been 85 degrees all day. The exterior of the Ebony Rose looked exactly like I expected. Decades of decay, graffiti covering the Art Deco facade, windows either boarded or broken, the marquee missing most of its letters so only row T8 remained, a fragment of former glory. The main entrance was chained shut, but a side door stood slightly open, and as I approached it, I felt the temperature drop another 20 degrees, and smelled that sulfur scent mixed with something else, something like incense and old wood, and darkness given physical form. I pushed the door open and stepped from ruin into impossible beauty. The lobby was pristine, restored beyond its original glory. Marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers, brass fixtures polished to mirrors, burgundy carpet so plush my footsteps made no sound, and the smell overwhelming now. Smoke and spice, and something ancient that made the rational part of my brain scream that this wasn't real, couldn't be real. The walls were covered in Art Deco murals depicting scenes from mythology, angels falling from heaven, demons rising from hell, and in the center of it all, a figure that looked almost human, but not quite, beautiful and terrible, watching everything with knowing eyes. I walked through the lobby in a daze, my hand trailing along the marble walls, to convince myself this was real, solid, not just a hallucination brought on by stress and guilt and too much alcohol. Everything felt hyper-real, colors too vivid, sounds too clear, like someone had turned up the intensity of reality itself. I could hear music playing faintly, something classical I couldn't identify, strings and piano creating a melody that was simultaneously beautiful and unsettling. The chandelier above me swayed slightly, though there was no breeze, and shadows moved in the corners of my vision, never quite visible when I looked directly at them. I pushed through the inner doors into the theatre itself, and the sight stole my breath. Hundreds of red velvet seats in perfect rows, golden balconies curving along walls painted with clouds and angels, a massive chandelier hanging from a ceiling that seemed to stretch higher than the building's exterior should allow, and the stage, that enormous stage with curtains the colour of fresh blood, pulled back to reveal a single spotlight illuminating a man who stood at its centre like an actor waiting for his cue. He was ageless in the way that predators are ageless, maybe 40 or maybe 4,000, tall and lean in a three-piece suit that probably cost more than my car. Dark hair swept back from a face that was beautiful in a way that made you uncomfortable, like looking at something your brain insisted shouldn't exist. Sharp cheekbones, full lips curved in a slight smile, and eyes that reflected the spotlight wrong, catching the light like an animal's eyes in headlights, golden and knowing and patient. "Andrew Kane," he said, and his voice filled the theatre without echo, cultured and warm and amused. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Please take a seat. We have so much to discuss." I stood frozen in the aisle, my lawyer's mind trying to find rational explanations. Hired actor, elaborate prank, hidden cameras, something that made sense. "Who are you? How did you do all this?" My voice came out thin and frightened, nothing like the commanding tone I used in courtrooms. He smiled wider and sat on the edge of the stage, legs dangling casually, like we were old friends catching up. "I'm Lucifer, and I didn't do anything. This place has always been beautiful. Most people just can't see it anymore. Their eyes are closed to certain truths. But you, Andrew, you're ready to see, aren't you? That's why you came." I laughed, and it sounded hysterical, even to me. "Lucifer? Right, the actual devil. This is insane. You're not real. None of this is real." But even as I said it, I was walking down the aisle, my legs moving without conscious decision, and I collapsed into a front row seat because standing suddenly seemed impossible. The velvet was impossibly soft, warmer than it should be, almost alive under my hands. He watched me with those wrong eyes, patient and knowing, and I noticed details I'd missed before. His skin was too pale, almost luminous in the stage light, and when he moved it was too fluid, too graceful, like he was slightly out of sync with normal physics. "Reality is subjective, Andrew," he said, his voice gentle now. "Consciousness interpreting electrical signals, memory reconstructing rather than recording. What you call real is just your brain's best guess at making sense of sensory input. But your guilt? That's real. I can smell it on you. 8 years of rot and regret buried so deep, you've almost convinced yourself it's not there. Shall we discuss Orlando Mitchell?" The name hit me like a physical blow, and something inside me cracked, all the walls I'd built crumbling. I was his lawyer. I did my job, that's all. But my voice had no conviction because we both knew I was lying. Lucifer stood in one fluid movement and walked to a music stand I hadn't noticed before, picking up a manila folder and tossing it into my lap with casual grace. "Oh, I'm not here to debate legal ethics. The law is just a framework humans invented to make sense of chaos. Really quite arbitrary when you think about it. I'm here to discuss what you buried. Go ahead. Open it. Confront what you've been running from." My hands trembled as I opened the folder and saw police reports, witness statements, crime scene photographs from August 2015, the convenience store robbery, the victim, Thomas Chen, 68 years old, photographs of his injuries that made me want to vomit, swollen and brutal, medical reports from 3 weeks later when he died from complications, his family's victim impact statements, describing a gentleman who volunteered at a community centre and told terrible jokes that made his grandchildren laugh. And underneath it all, a photograph I recognised immediately, even though I tried to forget it existed. Security camera footage from a gas station, timestamp 9:47 p.m, showing Orlando Mitchell clear as day purchasing cigarettes 2 miles from the robbery that happened at the exact same time. The image was crisp, undeniable, Orlando's face visible, the timestamp verified by multiple independent sources. I'd had absolute proof of his innocence, and I'd buried it because I was terrified of losing my first major trial. "You found this during trial preparation," Lucifer said, his voice gentle now, almost kind, and somehow that made it worse. "Exculpatory evidence, proof of innocence, timestamp verified by 3 independent sources. The gas station owner remembered Orlando because he was a regular customer, always bought the same brand of cigarettes, always friendly, always polite. Orlando Mitchell could not have committed that robbery because he was buying cigarettes at a gas station 2 miles away. You had absolute proof of his innocence, and you buried it." I tried to speak, but words stuck in my throat like broken glass. "The timestamp could have been wrong," I whispered, but even saying it out loud I heard how hollow it sounded, how pathetic. "The footage was grainy," my senior partner said, introducing questionable alibi evidence. "Could backfire. We already had reasonable doubt. We didn't need it. Presenting it could have made the jury suspicious, made them think we were trying too hard. I was just being strategic." Lucifer's smile was sad and knowing. "No, Andrew, you were being cowardly. The timestamp was verified by the gas station's owner, by the credit card payment system, by cell phone records that showed Orlando's phone pinging off a tower near the gas station at 9:47. You had ironclad proof, and you buried it because you were terrified." He walked down the stage steps, each footfall silent on the hardwood, and sat beside me, close enough that I could feel cold radiating from him like he was made of winter itself. "You were 29 years old, hungry and ambitious and terrified of losing your first major trial. You'd worked so hard to get to Hartman and Associates. Watching your parents struggle had made you desperate to succeed, and here was this case, high profile, career-making. If you won, career-destroying. If you lost, the senior partners were watching. Your colleagues were watching. Everyone was waiting to see if you'd sink or swim. His voice was hypnotic, pulling me back to that time, that cramped conference room, where I'd made the decision that would haunt me for 8 years. I remember sitting there with the security footage on my laptop, I said, the words spilling out now that the dam had broken. It was late, maybe 10 at night. Everyone else had gone home. I watched it maybe 50 times, looking for anything that would make it questionable, any reason I could justify not using it. The timestamp was solid. The image was clear. Orlando's face was unmistakable. And I absolutely knew, that if I presented this evidence, he'd be acquitted with a solid alibi, proven innocent, vindicated. My voice broke. But my senior partner had already warned me that the case was weak, that if I lost it would reflect badly on the firm, on me. He said we already had reasonable doubt. That was enough. And I was so scared, so terrified of failing. Lucifer listened without interrupting, and somehow that was worse than judgment would have been. So when you found evidence that would have absolutely exonerated your client, proven him innocent beyond any possible doubt, you made a choice. You suppressed it. You deleted it from the discovery file. You told yourself it was strategic, that you were being smart, that this was how the game was played. You won the case on reasonable doubt alone, technical arguments and witness credibility, and Orlando walked free but not vindicated, not proven innocent, just not proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Do you understand the difference? I understood. God help me, I'd always understood. The difference between being proven innocent and simply not being convicted is vast. Orlando had walked out of that courtroom with everyone still thinking he'd probably done it, just that the prosecution hadn't proven it well enough. His neighbors looked at him differently. His family questioned him. His employer fired him because clients felt uncomfortable. He was free, but he was marked, tainted by suspicion that should never have existed because he was actually innocent. 6 months later, Lucifer continued relentlessly, his voice still gentle but unyielding. Orlando Mitchell robbed a liquor store, shot the owner Miguel Santos twice in the chest. Miguel died on the scene while his killer stood over him in shock, and 3 children lost their father, a wife lost her husband, and Orlando got life without parole at Stateville Correctional. Tell me, Andrew, if you presented that security footage, if Orlando had been acquitted with a solid alibi, proven innocent in the eyes of the law and the community, vindicated completely, do you think he would have committed another robbery 6 months later? The question I'd asked myself 10,000 times over 8 years. The question that woke me at 3:33 every morning. The question that had slowly poisoned everything I'd built. I don't know, I whispered, but that was another lie. I did know. Deep down, I'd always known. Yes, you do, Lucifer said softly. You know exactly what would have happened. Orlando was innocent that first time. Truly, completely innocent. At his grandmother's house helping her with groceries, just like he said. And if he'd proven it, if he'd been publicly vindicated, his life would have been different. His employer wouldn't have fired him. His community wouldn't have shunned him. He wouldn't have been carrying the weight of everyone's suspicion, the mark of being that guy who probably did it, but got off. He would have been innocent, proven, and accepted. But you were too afraid to prove it, Lucifer continued, and now there was something like sadness in his voice. And when he walked out of that courtroom, not vindicated, but simply not convicted, what lesson do you think he learned? That the system was rigged, that he was guilty in everyone's eyes anyway, that truth didn't matter as much as lawyers playing games, that he might as well actually be the criminal everyone thought he was. Each question landed like a blow, and I couldn't deflect any of them because they were all true. Orlando told me something during our final meeting before the verdict, I said, the memory surfacing with painful clarity. He said, I didn't do this, Mr. Kane. I need people to know I didn't do this. And I said, that's not what matters. What matters is that we win. And he looked at me with these desperate eyes and said, but I'm innocent. And I said, legally, that's not the standard. Reasonable doubt is enough. But he was right, and you were wrong, Lucifer said. Being proven innocent mattered. Being vindicated mattered. Having the community know he didn't do it mattered. Because 6 months later, when he was broke and desperate and everyone treated him like a criminal anyway, he figured he might as well act like one. The system had already marked him guilty in everyone's minds. Why not prove them right? The logic was terrible and perfect, and I'd known it was happening. I'd watched it unfold from a distance, reading the articles about Orlando's second arrest, with horror and guilt, and the terrible knowledge that I could have prevented it. Thomas Chen never got justice, Lucifer said, standing now and pacing the aisle like a professor giving a lecture. His family spent years wondering why the system failed them, why their elderly father died from a beating that could have been prevented if the right person had been in prison. They sued the city, claimed police incompetence, never knowing that the real failure was in my defense, in my choice to prioritize winning over truth. And Miguel Santos, father of 3, working late to save money for his daughter's quinceañera, died because Orlando Mitchell had already learned that the truth was flexible and getting away with things was just a matter of having a smart lawyer. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, all the defenses I'd built for 8 years collapsing under the weight of finally saying it all out loud. I know, God help me, I know. I've lived with it every single day. Do you think I don't see their faces? I looked at Miguel's children. I know their names. Isabella, Marcus, little Sophia, who was only 6. I know what schools they go to, what they look like. I found their social media profiles. I've watched them grow up from a distance. I've seen Isabella's quinceañera photos that her father wasn't there to see. I've seen Marcus's graduation that his father wasn't there to attend. I've seen Sophia's first day of school photos without her father standing beside her. I've tortured myself with it for 8 years. Isn't that enough? Lucifer's laugh was sad and knowing and without any cruelty. Private torture isn't the same as accountability, Andrew. You've been punishing yourself in the dark. Very noble, very tormented, drinking alone and having nightmares and feeling terrible, stalking the family on social media and wallowing in guilt. But ultimately very safe, no real consequences, no actual change. Just private suffering that lets you feel like you're paying a price while keeping everything you built on that lie. Your partnership, your reputation, your nice apartment, all of it built on Orlando's destroyed innocence and Miguel's death. The words hit me like physical blows because they were completely true. I'd been performing guilt, engaging in a kind of theatre of remorse that let me feel bad, without actually doing anything about it. I'd kept my partnership at Hartman. I'd kept winning cases, building my reputation, making money. I'd kept every benefit I'd gained from that first terrible choice while telling myself that feeling bad about it was somehow enough. It wasn't. It had never been. Why are you here? I asked, desperate to understand. Why now? If you're really Lucifer, if this is actually happening, what do you want from me? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, handing it to me with something like sympathy in those terrible golden eyes. The photograph showed a woman in her 50s, skeletal thin, sitting in a hospital bed, dark hair streaked with grey, eyes that had been beautiful once, now hollowed by pain and illness, holding a rosary but her lips moving in words that looked nothing like any prayer I'd ever seen. Something about her face was familiar, and then I realized she had Miguel's eyes, that same gentle expression, even through the pain. Carmen Santos, Lucifer said, and my heart stopped. Miguel's widow. She's dying, Andrew. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give her 3 months at most, and she spent 3 years of her remaining life investigating Orlando Mitchell's first trial, She hired private investigators, found witnesses who remembered your trial preparation, tracked down the gas station owner who remembered giving you a copy of the security footage, uncovered your decision to suppress exculpatory evidence. My stomach turned to ice and the sulfur smell intensified until I could barely breathe. Carmen discovered that Thomas Chen died for nothing, that his death could have been avenged if Orlando's first trial had been handled with integrity. She learned that her husband might still be alive if you'd done the right thing 8 years ago. And Andrew, she made a deal with me. The theatre seemed to darken around us, shadows deepening in corners, the chandelier dimming until only the spotlight remained, and in that narrow circle of light I felt trapped, exposed like an insect pinned to a board. What kind of deal? My voice was barely audible, hoarse with fear and guilt and the terrible certainty that I was finally going to face real consequences. Her remaining years in exchange for bringing you to judgment. She prayed to every dark corner of the universe, begged for justice, for accountability, for you to finally face what you'd done. And I answered because sometimes prayers to darkness are more sincere than prayers to light. Carmen wanted you to confess, to face real consequences, to stop hiding behind private guilt and actually do something about it. She wanted you to hurt like she's hurt. He stood and walked back to the stage, the spotlight brightening until he seemed to glow, otherworldly and beautiful and terrible. I don't collect souls, Andrew. That's a misconception. Souls are complicated, messy things that even I don't fully understand. What I collect is truth, confession, accountability, the things people bury and refuse to face. Carmen's prayer was specific. She wanted you brought to judgment, wanted you to choose between continued cowardice and actual courage. So here we are in this beautiful theatre that most people can't see anymore, at the witching hour when truth becomes unavoidable. Lucifer held up one finger and his voice took on a formal quality, like reading terms of a contract. 3 choices, Andrew Kane. Pick one tonight, decide before you leave this theatre. Whatever you choose is binding and final. I don't break my agreements, and neither will you. First option, continue as you have been. Live with the knowledge forever, but from this moment forward, every time you close your eyes, every time you sleep, you'll experience Miguel Santos's final moments in vivid, inescapable detail. You'll feel the confusion when Orlando pulled the gun, the terror as he begged for his life in Spanish, words you'll understand, even though you don't speak the language, the pain of bullets tearing through your chest, the sensation of your lungs filling with blood, the cold spreading through your body as you died on a liquor store floor knowing your children were waiting at home for you to bring pizza for dinner every night, every time you close your eyes for even a moment, for the rest of your natural life. He held up a second finger. Second option, confess everything publicly. The suppressed evidence, the ethical violations, all of it. Hold a press conference. Contact the Bar Association. Reach out to Carmen Santos and Thomas Chen's family and Orlando Mitchell himself. Face disbarment, face possible criminal charges for obstruction of justice and evidence tampering, face the contempt of your colleagues and the judgment of the public. Let the world see exactly what you are. Lose everything you've built, your career, your reputation, your partnership, your income, your freedom possibly, your future certainly, everything. He held up a third finger and smiled sadly. Third option. Take Carmen's place, you die within the month. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, car accident. The method doesn't matter, but it will come, and she lives another 20 years healthy and whole. Her cancer disappears completely. She gets to watch her children grow up, meet grandchildren. Isabella will graduate college with her mother there. Marcus will get married with his mother in the front row. Little Sophia will have someone to braid her hair and teach her to be strong. Carmen gets to live the life that was stolen from her when you fail to do your job with integrity. You pay the ultimate price for your cowardice, and she gets everything back. The silence in the theatre was absolute. Even my heartbeat seemed too loud, echoing in that vast space. I could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me, crushing me, and I understood that this was real. Whatever Lucifer was, hallucination or supernatural being or manifestation of my own guilt, the choice was real, and the consequences would be real, and there was no escaping it. "Those aren't choices," I said finally, my voice breaking. "Those are all punishments, all three of them. There's no good option, no way out that doesn't destroy me." Lucifer shook his head, and for the first time, I saw something like disappointment in his golden eyes. "No, Andrew, they're consequences. You made a choice 8 years ago. You chose your career over truth, your ambition over a young man's innocence, your fear over integrity, and you've been benefiting from that choice ever since. Now you face the weight of it, the real cost that you've been avoiding. Most people, when given these options, choose the first one. Private suffering is so much easier than public shame, so much safer than death. They take the nightmares and convince themselves that enduring horror in the dark is somehow noble, somehow enough." He sat down in the seat in front of mine, turning to face me with those ancient golden eyes, and I realized he looked tired, not physically, but existentially, like he'd had this conversation 10,000 times and was weary of humanity's predictable cowardice. "Take your time, I'm patient. I've been patient for thousands of years. Eternity is a long time to develop patience. What's a few more hours? Decide before you leave this theatre. Once you walk out those doors, the choice is made, and there's no going back, no negotiation, no appeals. This is your moment of truth, Andrew Kane. Choose who you really are." I sat there trying to think, while my mind raced in circles like a trapped animal. The first option would be torture, reliving Miguel's death every night, feeling his terror and pain, but it would be private torture. I could keep my life, keep my career, keep my apartment and my partnership and everything I'd worked for, suffer alone where no one could see, martyr myself in the dark, and tell myself it was penance. Except it wasn't penance. Lucifer was right about that. It was just more cowardice, more hiding, more avoiding real consequences while performing suffering. The third option was dramatic and final, the ultimate sacrifice. I'd die and Carmen would live, and it would all be over. No more guilt, no more facing anyone, just an ending. It was appealing in a way that scared me, the idea of not having to face what I'd done, not having to see the disappointment in people's eyes, not having to explain or justify or watch my life collapse, just death and silence and escape. But that was cowardice too, wasn't it? Running away through death instead of actually facing what I'd done, giving Carmen her life back but not giving anyone the truth, not giving Orlando vindication, not giving the system a chance to correct itself. The second option, confession, that meant losing everything publicly, standing in front of everyone who respected me and admitting I was a fraud and a coward, facing legal consequences and social destruction, possibly prison, which terrified me more than I wanted to admit. Definitely the end of my career and reputation. No escape and no privacy, and no way to pretend I was somehow paying a price while keeping anything I'd built on lies. My parents' faces flashed through my mind. How proud they'd been when I made partner. How they died thinking I was successful and honourable. How this would destroy that memory. Alex would be devastated. Might never forgive me. Alexis would feel betrayed. All my colleagues would see me as a pariah. I'd lose everything. But wasn't that the point? Shouldn't I lose everything? Shouldn't there be real consequences for what I'd done? I'd destroyed Orlando's life. I'd contributed to Miguel's death. I'd caused suffering to 2 families, and I'd done it all to advance my own career. And I'd gotten away with it for 8 years, building a life on that foundation of lies and suppressed evidence and cowardice. Maybe losing everything was exactly what should happen. Maybe that was what justice actually looked like. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Lucifer, who was watching me with patient golden eyes. Why do you care? You're the devil, right? Aren't you supposed to encourage sin? Tempt people toward wrong choices? Why are you here forcing me to face what I did? He smiled, and for a moment he looked almost human, almost kind. A common misconception. I don't encourage sin, I reveal it. Humans do a fine job of sinning all on their own. They don't need my help. What I do is hold up a mirror and make them see what they've become, make them confront the gap between who they think they are and who they actually are. You thought you were a good man, Andrew, a successful lawyer, helping clients, but you were actually a coward who destroyed an innocent man's life to advance your career. I'm not here to tempt you. I'm here to make you see the truth. So, this is about truth, not punishment? I asked. Yes, he said simply. Truth is always the point. Lies are comfortable. Truth is hard. Humans will do almost anything to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. They'll build elaborate rationalizations, create whole fantasy versions of themselves, anything to avoid looking in the mirror. But truth has a way of surfacing eventually. It has weight. It creates pressure. And after 8 years, that pressure has become unbearable. You're here because you can't avoid the truth anymore. Your own guilt has brought you to this moment. Can I speak to her? I asked suddenly. To Carmen? Lucifer considered for a moment, his head tilted like a bird, studying something interesting. Then he pulled out a cell phone, which seemed absurdly mundane given everything else, like a god checking text messages. He dialed a number and handed me the phone. 3 rings, each one feeling like an eternity. Then a weak voice answered. Hello? My throat was so tight I could barely speak. Mrs. Santos? Carmen Santos? My name is Andrew Kane. I was Orlando Mitchell's defense attorney in his first trial. The silence that followed felt eternal, heavy with 8 years of pain and rage and grief. Then, I know who you are. Her voice was faint but fierce, dying but not defeated, and hearing it broke something in me that I hadn't known was still intact. I'm so sorry, I said, and the words felt pathetically inadequate, like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. I was wrong. I was a coward. I had evidence that could have proven Orlando innocent, and I buried it because I was scared of losing. Your husband might still be alive if I'd done the right thing. Your children might still have their father. I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I need you to know. I need you to hear me say it. I've been carrying this for 8 years, and I need you to know that I know what I did. Her breath rattled over the phone, wet and laboured, the sound of someone whose body was shutting down. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't raise my children. Sorry doesn't fill the empty chair at the dinner table or the cold side of the bed. Miguel was everything. He was kind and funny and good. He worked 2 jobs to give our kids opportunities he never had. He covered shifts for co-workers so they could go to their kids' baseball games. He volunteered at the community centre, teaching kids to play chess. He never hurt anyone. He was gentle and sweet, and he loved us so much, and that animal murdered him for $300 in the register. $300, that's what my husband's life was worth. I know, I said, and meant it. I'd read every article, studied every detail, tortured myself with the specifics of Miguel's death for 8 years. Do you? Her anger flared despite her weakness, and I could hear the strength she must have had before cancer ate it away. Do you really know what it's like to get a phone call at 11 at night? To see the police car pulling up outside and just know that everything is about to change forever? To rush to the hospital and be told your husband is already gone, that he died at the scene, that they tried but there was too much blood? To tell your 15-year-old daughter that her father is never coming home, to watch her face crumble, to hold your son while he screams that it's not fair, to explain to your 6-year-old that daddy isn't coming home ever again, and watch her not understand. Watch her keep asking when he'll be back. Each question cut deeper, and I had no answer, no way to express that I understood, except to say, "I'm sorry," over and over, like a broken record. Isabella was planning her quinceañera, Carmen continued, her voice breaking now. Miguel was so excited. He'd been saving for months, working extra shifts. He had it all planned out, the dress he wanted to buy her, the venue he wanted to rent, the band he wanted to hire. He was going to dance with her, that father-daughter dance. He'd been practicing in our kitchen when he thought no one was watching, and he died 3 months before her birthday. She had her quinceañera, but her father wasn't there. There was an empty chair where he should have been standing. Do you understand what you took from her? From all of us? Yes, I whispered, barely able to speak, through my tears. I want you to hurt like I hurt, Carmen said, each word cutting. I want you to lose everything, like I lost everything. I want you to know what it feels like when your whole world is destroyed by someone else's choice, someone else's cowardice, someone else's ambition. I want you to wake up every day knowing that your happiness came at the cost of someone else's suffering. I want you to carry that weight forever. Do you understand me? Yes, I said again. Good, she said, and I heard the satisfaction in her voice despite her weakness, because I made a deal to ensure you would. I gave up what's left of my life to bring you to this moment, to make you face what you've done, and it was worth it. Every day of suffering was worth it to know that you'll finally pay. The line went dead, and I handed the phone back to Lucifer with shaking hands. He pocketed it and waited, patient and terrible, and somehow sad, like he'd seen this moment play out countless times with countless people and knew how it would end. I sat there in that beautiful, impossible theater and thought about my life, really thought about it for the first time in years. The apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, beautiful and empty and meaningless. The career I'd built on lies, winning cases through skill and strategy and willingness to do whatever it took. The respect of colleagues who didn't know what I'd done. The partnership I'd achieved by suppressing evidence and destroying an innocent man's life. All of it built on sand, all of it earned through cowardice, all of it hollow. I thought about Alex teaching music to kids who'd probably never remember his name, but would carry the love of music he'd planted in them, choosing meaning over money, passion over prestige, living a life of actual integrity, even though it meant less money and no prestige. I thought about our parents, both gone now, who'd wanted their sons to be good men, more than they'd wanted us to be successful, who'd valued character over achievement, who would have been ashamed of what I'd become, even as they'd been proud of what I'd achieved. I'd confused success with goodness, convinced myself that winning was the same as being right, that career advancement justified any compromise. I thought about Orlando Mitchell, innocent at 22, scared and desperate, and begging me to prove his innocence, trusting me to do the right things, and me failing him because I was more afraid of losing than committed to truth. Orlando, at 23, marked as a criminal, even though he hadn't been, treated with suspicion and distrust, fired from his job, shunned by his community, pushed to the margins until he became what everyone already thought he was. Orlando, now at 30, spending the rest of his life in a cage because I'd been too cowardly to present evidence that would have saved him. I thought about Thomas Chen, 70 years old when he died, from complications of a beating he should never have suffered. His final weeks spent in pain and fear. His family watching him fade and not understanding why this had happened, why the system had failed them, never knowing that the failure was mine, that I'd had the power to prevent it and chosen not to. I thought about Miguel Santos, working late to afford his daughter's quinceañera, probably thinking about the dress he'd buy her or the band he'd hire, not knowing that his daughter's favourite client was about to walk in with a gun. not knowing that in 5 minutes his life would end on a liquor store floor while his killer stood over him in shock. And I thought about Carmen Santos spending her final months, her final precious, irreplaceable months, hunting for the truth instead of spending time with her children, driven by a need for justice so powerful that she'd made a deal with the devil himself, giving up what remained of her life to ensure that I had finally faced what I'd done. How much pain must she have been in? How much rage? How much desperate need for accountability? And I caused all of it. Not Orlando. Me. My choice. My cowardice. The first option would let me keep everything while suffering privately. Noble martyrdom in the dark, where no one could see exactly what I'd been doing for 8 years, except worse. More painful. More vivid. But it was still hiding. Still avoiding real consequences. Still keeping all the benefits I'd gained from destroying Orlando's life, while adding suffering that no one would see or know about. It was theatrical, performative, ultimately meaningless. The third option was dramatic and self-sacrificing, the ultimate price. And part of me wanted it desperately, wanted the escape, wanted to not have to face everyone's disappointment and contempt, wanted to give Carmen her life back and then just cease to exist. But it was also fundamentally cowardice. Running away through death instead of actually facing what I'd done. Giving Carmen 20 more years but not giving anyone the truth. Not correcting the record. Not helping Orlando. Not fixing anything except my own guilt through the ultimate escape. And the second option, confession, that meant standing in front of everyone and admitting exactly what I was. Losing everything publicly. Facing legal consequences. Probably prison. Definitely the end of my career. Social destruction, financial ruin, Alex's disappointment, my colleagues' contempt, the media's judgment, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, everything I'd become, all of it stripped away until only the truth remained. It was the hardest option, the scariest, the one that offered no comfort and no peace and no escape. But it was also the only one that was actually about justice, instead of just my own suffering. The only one that gave truth to the people who deserved it. The only one that corrected the record. And maybe, possibly, helped Orlando, even though it was far too late. The only one that actually required courage, instead of just endurance. "I'll confess," I said, and my voice was steady for the first time all night. Certain in a way I hadn't been certain about anything in 8 years. Everything, publicly. I'll hold a press conference, I'll contact the Bar Association, I'll reach out to Carmen's family and Thomas Chen's family, and Orlando himself. I'll face whatever consequences come. Legal, professional, social, all of it. I'll tell the truth about what I did and why I did it, and let everyone see exactly what I am. I'll lose everything if that's what it takes. I'll go to prison, if that's what justice requires. I'll spend the rest of my life paying for what I did. But I'll do it honestly, openly. I'll stop hiding. Lucifer smiled, and it wasn't cruel or victorious or gloating. If anything, he looked pleased, maybe even proud, like a teacher whose student had finally understood a difficult lesson. That's not the choice most people make. In my experience, about 80% choose the nightmares, the private suffering. They convince themselves that enduring horror in the dark is somehow noble. 15% choose death, the ultimate escape. Only about 5% choose confession, actual accountability. Why did you choose it? I thought about the question, really considered it, because it mattered. The why mattered almost as much as the choice itself. Because Carmen is right. I've been a coward for 8 years. I've been suffering in private and telling myself that my guilt was punishment enough. That feeling bad about it somehow balanced the scales. But it doesn't. It never did. Guilt without consequence is just cowardice with extra steps. Miguel Santos deserves more than my private agony. He deserves truth. Thomas Chen's family deserves more. They deserve to know why the system failed them. They deserve accountability. Orlando deserves more. He deserves vindication, even if it's 8 years too late. He deserves someone admitting that he was innocent all along, that the system failed him, that I failed him. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady I felt despite the tears streaming down my face. And I deserve to actually face what I've done instead of just feeling bad about it in the dark. I deserve to lose everything I built on lies. I deserve to stand in front of everyone who respected me and admit that I'm a fraud. I deserve whatever legal consequences come. I deserve to spend years in prison if that's what the law requires. I deserve all of it. Because I earned it 8 years ago when I chose my career over an innocent man's life. This isn't about feeling better or finding peace. This is about paying what I actually owe, and what I owe is the truth and everything that comes with it. Lucifer stood and extended his hand, and I shook it, his grip firm and cold and somehow ancient, like shaking hands with winter itself, with consequence itself, with truth itself. Very well, Andrew Kane. The choice is made and binding. There's no going back from this moment. No changing your mind when it gets hard. And it will get hard. Confession without consequence is just storytelling. Go make this real. Face everything you've been running from, and know that accountability is always more painful than guilt, but it's also the only thing that actually matters. Guilt is easy, cheap, private. Accountability is hard, expensive, public, but it's real in a way that guilt never can be. The theatre began to change around us, the lights dimming, the golden fixtures tarnishing and cracking, the velvet seats growing threadbare and torn, the painted ceiling cracking and peeling, the chandelier dimming until it was just a broken fixture, covered in dust and cobwebs, and within seconds I was standing in ruins, graffiti on the walls, broken seats, pigeons roosting in the balconies, dust and decay and abandonment everywhere. The beautiful, impossible theatre was gone, replaced by the reality of neglect and time. I was alone. Lucifer was gone. Had he ever been there? Was any of it real, or had I had some kind of breakdown, a psychotic episode, brought on by 8 years of suppressed guilt and too much alcohol and not enough sleep? I stumbled toward the exit, my legs weak and shaking, pushing through rotting doors that crumbled at my touch, and out into the parking lot where my car sat, exactly where I'd left it. My phone said it was 4:15 in the morning. I'd been inside for over 4 hours. I sat in my car and checked my recordings with trembling hands. Everything was there. My confession before going in, my voice shaky and uncertain, and a new file timestamped from inside the theatre, over 3 hours long. I hit play with my heart hammering, not sure what I'd hear, half expecting silence or my own voice talking to myself. But instead I heard everything, crystal clear, every word of my conversation with Lucifer. My voice confessing everything. The suppressed evidence, the ethical violations, the cowardice, every detail I'd never admitted out loud, all recorded somehow, ready to be shared, undeniable proof of what I'd done. I drove home as the sun rose over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost obscene in their beauty, like the world had no right to be beautiful when I felt so destroyed. I didn't sleep, didn't even try, knew that sleep was impossible now. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote, opened my laptop and just started typing. 23 pages pouring out of me, in a stream of consciousness that I'd been holding back for 8 years. Every choice I'd made, every moment I'd known it was wrong and done it anyway. The calculations and rationalizations and career considerations that had seemed so important at the time, all of it laid out in black and white, undeniable, damning, true. I wrote about finding the security footage during trial preparation, watching it 50 times looking for any reason not to use it, any flaw or question or ambiguity that would justify keeping it buried. I wrote about the meeting with my senior partner where he'd warned me that losing this case would reflect badly on my prospects at the firm, how he'd said the magic words, "Don't overthink this, Kane. We have reasonable doubt. That's enough. Remember that perfect is the enemy of good enough." I wrote about deleting the footage from the discovery file, telling myself it was strategy, that I was being smart, that this was how the game was played. I wrote about the moment the not guilty verdict was read, how Orlando had looked at me with such desperate hope, asking, "Does this mean they know I didn't do it?" And how I'd avoided his eyes and said, "It means you're free to go," not answering the actual question because I knew the truth, that no, it didn't mean anyone knew he didn't do it. It just meant they couldn't prove he did. I wrote about walking out of that courtroom feeling sick and hollow but telling myself it was just post-trial exhaustion, that the feeling would pass, that I'd done my job, and that was enough. I wrote about 6 months later when I saw the news about Orlando's arrest for Miguel Santos' murder, how I'd felt my stomach drop, how I'd immediately pulled up the case details and seen the security footage, showing Orlando clearly, undeniably committing the robbery and murder, and how I'd known, absolutely known, that this was my fault. I wrote about attending Orlando's second trial in the back of the courtroom, watching him be sentenced to life without parole, seeing Carmen Santos' face as she gave her victim impact statement, hearing her describe Miguel's death and their children's suffering, and knowing that I'd caused all of it. I wrote about the 8 years since, the nightmares and the drinking, and the private suffering that I'd told myself was penance, but was actually just cowardice. The way I'd stalked the Santos family on social media, watching their grief from a distance, the way I'd kept track of Orlando in prison, the way I'd tortured myself while keeping all the benefits of my terrible choice, the partnership and the money and the respect I didn't deserve. I wrote all of it, every detail, holding nothing back, creating a document that would destroy me completely. At 8 in the morning, I called Alex. It rang 4 times and I almost hung up, almost lost my nerve. But then he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "Andrew, it's Saturday morning. It's early. Everything okay?" His voice was concerned, worried. He'd been worried about me for months. "No," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. "Everything's not okay, but it's about to be. I need you to know what I'm about to do, and I need you to understand why. I need you to listen without interrupting, because if you interrupt, I might lose my nerve, and I can't lose my nerve. Not now. Not when I've finally found it." I told him everything, the whole story, the trial and the evidence and Orlando and Miguel and Carmen and the theatre, and whether Lucifer had been real or a manifestation of my breaking mind didn't matter. What mattered was what I was going to do next. I read him the whole confession, all 23 pages, my voice breaking occasionally, but never stopping, letting him hear every terrible detail, every cowardly choice, every rationalization, everything. When I finished, there was the silence on the line for so long, I thought he'd hung up. Then, "I'm proud of you." His voice was thick with emotion, maybe crying, I couldn't tell. "I know that sounds crazy, I know you just confessed to something terrible, but I'm proud of you. You did a terrible thing, and you're facing it. That takes courage, real courage, the kind that actually matters." "I'm about to destroy my entire life," I said. "Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's all going to be gone. My career, my reputation, probably my freedom. I'll lose everything." "No," Alex said softly, gently, like he was explaining something to one of his students. "You're about to stop destroying yourself. There's a difference. You've been dying slowly for 8 years. I've watched it happen. Watched you hollow out. Watched the light go out of your eyes. At least now you'll be honest while you pay the price. At least now you'll be real." "I'm scared," I admitted the first time I'd said it out loud. "I'm so scared of what's going to happen, of prison, of losing everything, of everyone knowing what I did." "I know," Alex said. "But being scared and doing it anyway, that's courage. That's actual real courage, not the fake kind where you're not scared. The real kind where you're terrified, but you do the right thing anyway." "Will you still be my brother?" I asked, my voice small. "After everyone knows? After I'm convicted? After I'm in prison?" "Always," he said without hesitation. "You're my brother. You did something terrible, but you're facing it. You're making it right as much as you can. I'll be here, I promise. I'll visit you wherever you end up. I'll be here." By noon, I'd contacted the Illinois State Bar Association, sent them my full written confession, requested an immediate investigation. I'd reached out to Carmen Santos' attorney, explaining who I was and that I needed to speak to her urgently about Orlando Mitchell's first trial. I'd called a press conference at my firm's offices for 2 in the afternoon, didn't explain what it was about, just said I had an important announcement regarding a past case, and I'd sent copies of everything, the written confession, and the audio recording from the theatre, to 3 investigative journalists who I knew would pursue the story, even if somehow the Bar Association tried to bury it. Alexis showed up at my apartment around 1, let herself in with the spare key I'd given her years ago, and found me sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by documents. "Andrew, what's going on? Your assistant said you called a press conference about what? And why didn't you tell me? We're supposed to be partners, we handle media together." She stopped when she saw my face, when she saw the documents spread out on the table, when she saw the resignation in my eyes. "What did you do?" I handed her the confession. "Read it, all of it. I need you to understand before you see it on the news." She sat down and read, her expression changing from confused to shocked to horrified as she worked through the 23 pages. When she finished, she looked at me with something like grief in her eyes. "The Mitchell case. Oh my God, Andrew, you suppressed exculpatory evidence. You had proof of innocence and you buried it. How could you do that? How could you call yourself a defense attorney and do that to a client?" "I was scared," I said simply. "I was 29 and scared of losing, and I made a terrible choice. And I've been living with it ever since, but living with it privately. Suffering in the dark where no one could see. And that's not enough. That's never been enough. I need to face actual consequences. Real accountability. I need to tell the truth, even though it costs everything." Alexis stared at me, and I could see her mind working through the implications. "This will destroy you. You know that, right? Disbarment for certain, criminal charges probably. You could go to prison for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, maybe other charges I'm not even thinking of right now. Your career is over. Your reputation is over. Everything you've worked for is over." "I know," I said. "That's the point. I should lose everything. I deserve to lose everything. What I did was unforgivable, and I got away with it for 8 years while building a career on that foundation of lies. It's time to pay what I actually owe." She stood up and paced my kitchen, running her hands through her hair, looking like she wanted to talk me out of it, but knowing she couldn't. "You're really going to do this? Really going to confess publicly? Really going to destroy yourself?" "Yes," I said with absolute certainty. "I met the devil last night. Or I hallucinated him. Or I had a psychotic break. I don't know which, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that I finally see clearly. I finally understand that guilt, without consequence, is just cowardice. I've been a coward for 8 years, and I'm done." She looked at me for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, hugged me. "I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did. To Orlando, to that family, to the profession we're supposed to honor. But I respect this. I respect facing it. I respect choosing truth over comfort. That takes real courage." "Will you come to the press conference?" I asked. "Be there as my friend, not my colleague. Just as someone who knows me." She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I'll be there. You shouldn't have to do this completely alone, even though part of me thinks you should. No. The press conference was in Hartman & Associates' main conference room, the same room where I'd celebrated partnership 3 years ago, where I'd won cases and negotiated settlements and built my reputation. Now it was filled with reporters, cameras, curious colleagues who didn't know what this was about but sensed it was something big. I saw the senior partners in the back, looking confused and increasingly worried. I saw Alexis standing off to the side, her face neutral but her eyes sad. I saw the media, hungry for whatever story I was about to give them. I stood at the podium and looked out at all those faces, all those cameras, all that judgment waiting to be unleashed, and I felt strangely calm. This was right. This was necessary. This was 8 years overdue. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice steady. My name is Andrew Kane. I'm a partner here at Hartman & Associates, and I'm here today to confess to ethical violations and criminal conduct related to a case I tried 8 years ago, the case of People versus Orlando Mitchell. The room went silent, that shocked silence when everyone knows something big is happening, but doesn't quite understand it yet. In August of 2015, I represented Orlando Mitchell in his trial for armed robbery and assault of Thomas Chen. During trial preparation, I discovered security camera footage that definitively proved Orlando's innocence. He was at a gas station 2 miles away at the time of the robbery. The footage was clear and the timestamp was verified by multiple independent sources. I had absolute proof that my client did not commit the crime he was accused of. I paused, letting that sink in, watching understanding dawn on faces, watching shock and confusion turn to horror. I suppressed that evidence. I deleted it from the discovery file. I buried it because I was afraid of losing the case, afraid it would reflect badly on my career prospects, afraid of what the senior partners would think if I lost a high-profile trial. I chose my career over my client's vindication, over the truth, over my ethical obligations, and I won the case on reasonable doubt alone. Orlando Mitchell was acquitted, but not proven innocent. He walked free but marked as someone who probably did it and just got off on a technicality. The room erupted in murmurs, shocked conversations, people pulling out phones to record or check facts, but I kept talking, my voice rising above the noise. 6 months after that acquittal, Orlando Mitchell robbed a liquor store and killed the owner, Miguel Santos, a father of 3 who was working late to save money for his daughter's quinceañera. Miguel died at the scene, and Orlando is now serving life without parole at Stateville Correctional, and that death is on me. If I had presented the security footage during his first trial, if I had proven his innocence beyond any doubt, Miguel Santos would likely still be alive today. His children would have their father. His wife wouldn't be dying of cancer while seeking justice for her husband's death. I pulled out the written confession and held it up. I've prepared a detailed confession, 23 pages, documenting every decision I made, every ethical violation I committed, every rationalization I used to justify it. I'm providing copies to the media, to the Illinois State Bar Association, to the families of Thomas Chen and Miguel Santos, to Orlando Mitchell himself. I'm facing disbarment and criminal prosecution, and whatever other consequences come, I'm pleading guilty to whatever charges are filed. I'm accepting full responsibility for what I did. The questions started immediately, dozens of reporters shouting, but I held up my hand. I won't be taking questions. I'm providing my full written confession and a recorded audio confession that includes all the details. Everything is documented, everything is provable. I'm not trying to minimize or justify or explain away what I did. I'm simply confessing and accepting consequences. The only thing I want to say is that I'm sorry. To Orlando Mitchell, who I failed completely. To Thomas Chen's family, who never got justice. To Miguel Santos' family, who lost him because of my cowardice. I'm sorry, and I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. I walked out through a sea of shouting reporters. Cameras flashing, colleagues staring at me with shock and contempt and confusion. And I felt strangely light, like I'd been carrying a massive weight for 8 years and had finally put it down. Alexis caught up with me in the hallway. "That was the most insane thing I've ever seen anyone do. You just destroyed yourself on national television." "I know," I said, "but it was the right thing to do. Finally, 8 years late, but the right thing." The consequences were swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, the Illinois State Bar had opened a formal investigation and suspended my license pending the outcome. Within 48 hours, Hartman and Associates had announced my immediate termination and released a statement condemning my actions. Within 72 hours, the Cook County State's Attorney had announced criminal charges: obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, each carrying potential prison time. The media coverage was relentless and brutal. My face on every news channel, think pieces about legal ethics, interviews with legal experts, all saying the same thing. What I'd done was unconscionable. I cooperated with everything, gave detailed testimony to the Bar Association, sat for depositions in the civil lawsuits that were filed almost immediately, provided all my files and documents and communications to prosecutors. I didn't hide behind lawyers or PR representatives or carefully crafted statements. I just told the truth over and over to anyone who asked, admitting everything, accepting responsibility, never trying to minimize or justify or explain away what I'd done. Thomas Chen's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit naming me, personally, their attorney arguing that Chen died from injuries sustained in a robbery that could have been prevented if I'd done my job with integrity in Orlando's first trial. I didn't contest it, didn't fight it, just provided all my records and agreed to settlement discussions. Carmen Santos' attorney contacted me through my lawyer. Carmen wanted to meet me before she died. 2 weeks after my confession, I drove to the hospice facility where Carmen was spending her final days. The building was nicer than I expected, sunny and warm, with gardens outside and artwork on the walls, trying to make death comfortable somehow. Her daughter Isabella met me in the lobby, and up close I could see Miguel in her features, his eyes and his gentle expression, even through her obvious grief and anger. "My mother's been waiting for you," she said, her voice cold but not hostile, just tired. "She doesn't have much time left." Carmen was in a corner room, with windows overlooking a small garden where roses were blooming, red and pink and yellow, almost offensively beautiful against the reality of death happening inside. She looked even more frail than in the photographs, the cancer having consumed her until she was barely there, just bones and determination, and those fierce eyes that still burned with anger and grief, and something that might have been satisfaction. "Mrs. Santos," I said softly, not sure if I should approach or stay by the door. "Thank you for seeing me." She studied me with those eyes that were so much like her husband's, taking in my appearance, reading something in my face. "You look terrible," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Good. You should look terrible. You should feel terrible. Sit down. I don't have energy to shout across the room." I sat in the chair beside her bed, close enough to smell the sickness and the medications and the flowers someone had brought, trying to mask both. "I saw your confession," she said, "watched it 3 times, wanted to make sure I understood every word, every detail of your cowardice." "I'm so sorry," I said, knowing it was inadequate but needing to say it anyway. "I know sorry doesn't change anything, doesn't bring Miguel back, doesn't give you back the years you've lost, but I need you to know that I understand what I did. I understand that your husband died because of me, that your children grew up without a father because of me, that you're dying angry and grief-stricken because of me. I carry that weight, and I'll carry it forever." She watched me for a long moment, her breathing labored, and then said something I didn't expect. Why did you confess? You could have kept hiding, kept your career, kept your comfortable life. No one was close to figuring it out. The investigators I hired found hints, but nothing provable. You could have taken it to your grave, so why confess? I thought about the question, about how to explain what had happened in the theatre, about Lucifer and the choice and the weight of 8 years of cowardice. Because I met someone who made me understand that private guilt isn't the same as accountability. I've been suffering for 8 years, but I was suffering in private, in secret, keeping all the benefits of my terrible choice while feeling bad about it, and that's not justice. That's not accountability. That's just cowardice with extra steps. Your husband deserved better. Thomas Chen deserved better. Orlando deserved better. You all deserve the truth and real consequences, so I'm giving you that. 8 years late, but I'm giving you what you deserved from the beginning. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Her eyes closed, and I thought maybe she'd fallen asleep, but then she spoke again. I prayed for this, prayed to God first, but he didn't answer, so I prayed to darker things, older things, things that don't forgive but do deliver justice. And something answered me. Something promised me you'd face judgment. And here we are. Here we are, I agreed. I don't know if what I met was real or a hallucination, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm doing what should have been done 8 years ago. Read to me, she said suddenly, gesturing weakly to a book on the nightstand. The same Pablo Neruda collection I'd seen in photographs. My eyes are tired, and my daughter's voice is too sad. Read to me. You owe me at least that much. So I picked up the warm book and read to her. Love sonnets in Spanish that I butchered with my poor pronunciation, and she corrected me occasionally, her voice getting weaker but still fierce, still demanding accuracy, even in poetry. We sat like that for maybe 40 minutes, me reading about love and loss and beauty, while she listened with her eyes closed. And it felt like the least I could do, this small comfort for a woman I'd helped destroy. Eventually she fell asleep, her breathing shallow and laboured, and Isabella came in and touched my shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. She's been so angry for so long, carrying all this rage and grief. But today, after your confession, she seemed calmer, like maybe she could finally let go, like justice was finally being served. "I'm sorry for what I did to your family," I said, standing to leave. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I understand what I took from you. Your father was a good man who deserved to live, to see you grow up, to walk you down the aisle someday, to meet his grandchildren. I took all of that because I was a coward." Isabella looked at me with her father's eyes, and I saw something complex there. Not forgiveness, but maybe understanding, or at least the beginning of understanding. Sorry doesn't bring him back, but the truth helps, knowing why he died, knowing that someone is actually being held accountable. That helps a little. It doesn't fix anything, but it helps. "Your mother made a deal to ensure I'd be held accountable," I said. "She gave up what remained of her life to bring me to judgment. That's how much she loved your father, how much she needed justice. I want you to know that her sacrifice meant something, that it worked." "I know," Isabella said. "She told me about the prayers, the deal she made. I thought she was delirious from the pain medication, but then your confession happened and I realized she'd actually done it somehow. She'd actually brought you down. My mother is the strongest person I've ever known, stronger than cancer, stronger than grief, strong enough to call down judgment from hell itself, if that's what it took." "She succeeded," I said. "Tell her when she wakes up that she succeeded, that I'm facing everything she wanted me to face, that justice is being served, however imperfectly." Carmen Santos died 3 days later. Isabella called to tell me, her voice calm but sad, telling me that her mother had passed peacefully in her sleep, that her last words were, "He knows now, Miguel. He knows what he did." The funeral was the following Monday at a Catholic church on the south side, and I attended despite knowing I wasn't welcome, despite the hostile looks from family members, standing in the very back of the church, not speaking to anyone, not approaching the family, just there to witness and remember and pay whatever small respect I could. The legal process ground forward with bureaucratic inevitability. The Bar Association's investigation was thorough and damning. Multiple witnesses confirmed I'd had the security footage. The gas station owner testified that he'd personally given me a copy. Other attorneys who'd worked on the case testified about the deliberate suppression. The disbarment was formalised within 2 months, my licence permanently revoked, my name added to a list of attorneys, disciplined for ethical violations that would follow me forever. The criminal case took longer, but the outcome was never in doubt. I confessed everything publicly, provided all the evidence myself, pleaded guilty to every charge filed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 50s who looked at me with unconcealed contempt, didn't even have to work for the conviction. My own lawyer, a public defender assigned because I could no longer afford private counsel, advised me to allocate fully, to throw myself on the mercy of the court, to express remorse and hope for leniency. The sentencing hearing was on a Thursday morning in November, 6 months after my confession. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and people from both the Chen and Santos families. The judge, a stern man in his 60s who'd been on the bench for 20 years, looked at me with something like sadness. "Mr. Kane, I've read your confession, heard your allocution, reviewed all the evidence in this case, and I want to say that what you did was a betrayal of everything the legal profession is supposed to stand for. You had a duty to your client, to the court, to the pursuit of justice, and you violated all of those duties because you were afraid of losing, because you put your career above the truth." He paused, looking at me over his reading glasses. "However, I also note that you've accepted full responsibility. You've confessed publicly. You've cooperated completely with every investigation. You've pleaded guilty without attempting to minimize your conduct. That counts for something. Not enough to excuse what you did, but enough to warrant some consideration in sentencing." The courtroom was silent, everyone waiting. "On the charge of obstruction of justice, I sentence you to 6 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. On the charge of evidence tampering, I sentence you to 4 years concurrent. You'll serve a total of 6 years with possibility of parole. After 4, bailiff, please remand the defendant." 6 years. It could have been worse. The prosecutor had asked for 10 to 15 years, but it was still 6 years of my life. 6 years in prison, 6 years paying for what I'd done. I was allowed a few minutes to say goodbye to Alex, who'd been at every hearing, every deposition, every court appearance. We hugged, and he was crying, and I was crying, and he promised to visit, promised to write, promised to still be my brother. "I'm proud of you," he said again. "I know that's crazy, but I am. You're facing this, you're paying what you owe. That takes real courage." Before I reported to begin my sentence, I made one final trip, driving 4 hours downstate to Stateville Correctional Center, where Orlando Mitchell was serving his life sentence. I'd arranged through lawyers and bureaucracy and official channels to visit him, though I wasn't sure he'd agree to see me. They processed me through security, took my belongings, ran metal detectors over me, treated me like I was already a prisoner, which I supposed I was about to be, and then led me to a visitor's room, sterile and depressing, with plastic chairs bolted to the floor. They brought Orlando in wearing chains, hands and feet shackled, accompanied by 2 guards who positioned themselves near the door. He was 30 now, 8 years older than the scared kid I'd represented, but prison had aged him far beyond that. His face hard, eyes dead, posture defensive, all the youth and hope burned out of him by 8 years in a cage. He sat across from me with his jaw clenched, radiating hostility and suspicion. "Why are you here?" To tell you I'm sorry and to tell you what I did, I said, my voice steady, despite the fear and guilt churning in my gut. To tell you the truth, I should have told you 8 years ago. His eyes narrowed. I saw your confession on TV, watched it in the day room with a bunch of guys who thought it was hilarious. A lawyer actually admitting he screwed someone. They couldn't believe it, neither could I. So yeah, I know what you did. You had proof I was innocent and you buried it. So what do you want, absolution? Forgiveness? Fuck you. No, I said. I don't want forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. I want you to know the truth. I want you to hear me say it directly to your face. You were innocent. You were at your grandmother's house, exactly like you said. You were buying cigarettes at a gas station, exactly when the robbery happened. I had absolute proof, and I buried it, because I was scared of losing, because I cared more about my career than your vindication, because I was a coward. Orlando stared at me with those dead eyes. I told you I was innocent. I begged you to prove it. I said, Mr. Kane, people need to know I didn't do this. And you said, that's not what matters. What matters is that we win. Remember that. Remember looking at me and saying truth didn't matter? I remembered. God help me, I remembered that conversation perfectly. Remembered his desperate young face. Remembered my smooth lawyer answer that prioritized strategy over truth. I remember, I said, and I was wrong. Truth did matter. It mattered more than anything, and I failed you completely. My grandmother believed me, Orlando said, his voice shaking now with suppressed rage. She was the only one. Everyone else thought I probably did it, and just got off. My friends looked at me different. Neighbors crossed the street when they saw me coming. I got fired from my job at the warehouse because the boss said I made customers uncomfortable. I was innocent, and you made everyone think I was guilty anyway. You destroyed my life before I ever did anything wrong. I know, I said, and I'm sorry. I can't say it enough times to make it mean anything, but I'm sorry. You deserve better. You deserved a lawyer who cared about truth more than winning, who cared about your innocence more than his career. And instead you got me. Orlando's hands clenched into fists, the chains rattling. When I did that second robbery, when I shot that man, you know what I was thinking? I was thinking everyone already thinks I'm a criminal. Might as well be what they think I am. The system already marked me guilty. Might as well prove them right. That's your legacy. You turned an innocent kid into a murderer. I know, I said again, and that's on me, not entirely. You made your own choice when you pulled that trigger, but I created the conditions that made that choice possible. I pushed you toward it by failing to vindicate you when I had the chance. Miguel Santos died because I was a coward. You're serving life because I was a coward. 2 lives destroyed, 2 families destroyed, all because I was afraid of losing a case. We sat in silence for a moment, nothing left to say. The truth lay bare between us, with no way to fix it or undo it or make it better. I'm going to prison too, I said finally. 6 years for what I did. It's not enough. Not nearly enough. You got life, and I got 6 years for destroying your life. It's not fair. It's not justice. But it's what the law allows. I'll spend every day in there thinking about you, about what I took from you, about how I failed you. Orlando laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and broken. 6 years? That's it? That's what my innocence was worth? 6 years for you and life for me? That's fucking justice. No, I agreed. It's not justice. It's just consequences, inadequate consequences. But it's all the system allows. I wish I could give you back those 8 years. I wish I could give you back your innocence and your life and your future. But I can't. All I can do is tell you the truth and face what I can face, and hope that counts for something. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Orlando stood up, the guards moving closer. I hope every day in there is hell for you. I hope you remember me every single day. I hope you remember what you took from me and carry it forever. I will, I promised. I absolutely will. Every day, I'll remember. I'll think about you, and what I did, and what it cost. I'll carry the weight of it until I die. It's the least I can do. The very least. He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in those dead eyes. Not forgiveness, but maybe acknowledgement. Maybe recognition that at least I was finally telling the truth. "You really met the devil?" he asked suddenly. "Like you said in your confession, you really talked to Lucifer in a theater?" "I think so," I said, "or I had a breakdown, or I hallucinated. I don't know, but something happened that night that made me see clearly, made me understand that hiding from truth was the same as continuing the lie. Real or not, that encounter changed everything. Made me choose honesty over comfort, accountability over cowardice." Orlando nodded slowly. "Good. I hope it was real. I hope the devil himself had to come drag the truth out of you because you weren't man enough to tell it yourself. I hope that haunts you more than anything." "It does," I said. "Every day." The guards took him away, and I sat alone in that depressing room for a few minutes, composing myself, and then I was escorted out through security and back to my car, and I drove away from that prison knowing I'd be returning soon, not as a visitor, but as an inmate, and the thought terrified me but felt right somehow, felt like justice, however imperfect. Alex helped me prepare for prison, spent my last week of freedom with me, not talking about much, just being brothers, just being present. We sorted through my apartment, gave away most of my stuff, put some things in storage that I want when I got out, assuming I got out, assuming I survived. "You'll be okay," Alex said the night before I had to report. "You're tough. You'll make it through this." "I'm not tough," I said. "I'm terrified. Terrified of prison, of violence, of being trapped, of losing 6 years. Being terrified and doing it anyway, that's courage," he said, echoing what he'd told me before. "You're doing the right thing, even though it's hard. That's what matters." "Will you really visit me?" I asked, needing the reassurance. "Wherever they send me, however far it is." "Every month," he promised. "I'll be there. You'll see my face on visiting day, and you'll know you're not alone. You'll never be alone. I'm your brother. That doesn't change because you're in prison." I reported to the Illinois Department of Corrections on a cold Monday morning in December, processed through intake with dozens of other men, starting their sentences, stripped and searched and given prison clothes and a number, no longer Andrew Kane attorney, but just prisoner 08-847-002, just another convict, among thousands. They sent me to a medium security facility downstate, 3 hours from Chicago, far from anyone I knew, and I entered that place knowing I wouldn't leave for years. The first weeks were exactly as terrible as I'd feared. Violence and noise and constant vigilance, learning the rules, both official and unofficial, figuring out who to avoid and where not to go, and how to survive in a place designed to break you. I got in 2 fights in the first month, both times just defending myself from people testing the new guy, and I learned quickly that showing weakness was dangerous, but so was showing too much strength, that prison was a delicate balance of being neither victim nor predator. But I also found unexpected things. A library where I could read and think and escape for a few hours. A prison job shelving books and helping other inmates find materials. Guards who treated us with dignity instead of contempt. Other prisoners who'd made terrible mistakes and were genuinely trying to be better. It wasn't redemption, wasn't peace, wasn't even close to comfortable, but it was honest in a way my previous life hadn't been. Everyone here knew what everyone had done. There was no pretending, no performance, just truth, however ugly. Alex visited every month like he promised. 3-hour drive each way to sit with me for an hour in the visiting room, and those visits became the highlight of my existence, the thing I looked forward to and held on to during the worst times. He told me about his students, about the music program he'd started bringing into prisons, including mine, about his life continuing while mine was suspended. And he never judged, never lectured, just accepted me as I was, imprisoned and broken, but trying. I write letters constantly to Miguel Santos' children, telling them about their mother's final days and her strength and her love for them, to Thomas Chen's family apologizing, though I know it changes nothing, to Orlando Mitchell, though he never writes back, and I don't expect him to. I write to Alex every week, long rambling letters about prison life and philosophy and guilt and whatever else occupies my mind in this place. And I write in a journal, documenting everything, trying to understand how I became someone who destroyed lives through cowardice, and how I might become someone better. 6 months into my sentence, I'm sitting in my cell writing this final account, trying to make sense of everything that happened. The terrible choice 8 years ago, and the nightmares and the birds and the theatre and Lucifer and the confession and everything that followed. I don't know if I really met the devil that night in the Ebony Rose Theater. The rational part of my mind, the lawyer part that was trained to think in evidence and logic, says I had a breakdown, that Lucifer was a manifestation of my guilt, a psychological construct that forced me to face what I'd been running from for 8 years, that the theatre itself was probably just ruins and everything I experienced was hallucination or delusion, brought on by stress and guilt and too much alcohol and too little sleep, but late at night lying on my bunk while my cellmate snores, and the prison settles into its nighttime sounds of distant voices and slamming doors and guards making rounds, I wonder. Because that encounter, real or imagined, changed everything in a way that seems too profound to be just my own mind breaking. It held up a mirror and made me see not who I pretended to be, but who I actually was. A coward, a liar, someone who chose an ambition over integrity and spent 8 years trying to bury the cost, trying to pretend that private guilt was the same as accountability. That feeling bad was the same as making amends. Lucifer, if he was real, didn't damn me. I'd already damned myself 8 years ago when I made that choice in a conference room at Hartman and Associates, weighing evidence against career advancement and choosing wrong, choosing fear over courage, choosing myself over Orlando, choosing comfort over truth. He just made me see it, made me stop hiding from the truth, made me choose between comfortable lies and painful honesty, made me face the consequences I'd been avoiding for 8 years. People talk about the devil as a tempter, someone who leads you into sin, who whispers in your ear that wrong is right and encourages your worst impulses. But what if that's wrong? What if sometimes the devil's job isn't to make you worse, but to force you to see how bad you've already become? To hold up that mirror and refuse to let you look away? To offer you choices that reveal who you really are underneath all the rationalizations and self-deceptions? To be the voice that finally says enough, no more hiding, time to face what you've done and who you've become. That's what happened in the theatre. Lucifer offered me 3 choices, none of them easy, all of them revealing. The first choice, private suffering, the nightmares and horror that no one would see. That was what I'd already been choosing for 8 years. Just more of the same cowardice, dressed up as penance. The third choice, death in exchange for Carmen's life. That was dramatic, but ultimately an escape, avoiding accountability through the ultimate exit. Only the second choice, confession and public consequences, required actual courage, required facing people's judgment and losing everything, and accepting real accountability for what I'd done. And I chose it. After 8 years of cowardice, I finally chose courage. I chose truth over comfort, accountability over hiding, real consequences over private suffering. It cost me everything, my career and my reputation and my freedom and 6 years of my life. But it also gave me something more important. It gave me back my integrity. It gave me the ability to look at myself honestly, to sleep without seeing faces I'd failed, to be a person who faces his mistakes instead of running from them. I've got 5.5 years left on my sentence, assuming I make parole at 4 years, which is possible if I stay out of trouble. After that, I don't know. I can't practice law. My name is permanently associated with one of the worst ethical violations in Illinois legal history. I'll be a middle-aged ex-convict trying to build a life from nothing. I've thought about teaching, maybe getting certified to teach in prisons, helping other people avoid the mistakes I made. I've thought about writing, documenting this story as a cautionary tale about ambition and cowardice and the price of lies. I've thought about volunteering with innocence projects, using what I know about the legal system to help free people who were actually innocent, making some small amends for what I did to Orlando. But mostly I just think about truth and accountability and the difference between them. Truth is what happened, the facts, the reality that exists, whether we acknowledge it or not. Accountability is facing those facts, accepting consequences, allowing truth to change us and cost us, and remake us into something more honest. For 8 years, I knew the truth, but avoided accountability. Told myself that knowing and feeling bad was enough, that private guilt was a form of penance, but it wasn't. It was just another lie, another way of avoiding the real cost of my choices. Lucifer taught me that. Or my breaking mind taught me that, using Lucifer as a vehicle, or some combination of both. Either way, the lesson was real and necessary and life-changing. Confession without consequence is just storytelling, just performance, just another way of making yourself feel better without actually changing anything. Real confession means facing consequences, accepting accountability, allowing truth to destroy what needs to be destroyed so something more honest can be built. I don't know if God will forgive me for what I did. I don't know if Carmen Santos forgave me before she died, though her daughter suggested she found some peace. I don't know if Miguel's children will ever forgive me, or if Thomas Chen's family will, or if Orlando Mitchell will, and I don't expect them to. Forgiveness isn't something I'm entitled to demand or expect, but I've forgiven myself, not for what I did, which is unforgivable, but for being human enough to face it, for finding the courage, however late, to stop running, for choosing truth over comfort, even when it cost everything. The devil's greatest trick, they say, is convincing the world he doesn't exist. But maybe his greatest trick is holding up a mirror and making us see who we really are, making us confess not to him but to ourselves, making us choose between comfortable lies and painful truths, making us face the gap between who we think we are and who we actually are, and forcing us to close that gap through accountability and consequence and honesty, however painful. I met Lucifer in an abandoned theater on a summer night in Chicago, or I had a psychotic break and imagined the whole thing, or I had a profound psychological experience that manifested as a supernatural encounter. Either way, that night changed everything. It forced me to confess my sins, not to some supernatural being, but to myself first and then to everyone else, to face consequences, to stop hiding, to choose accountability over comfort, to be honest about who I was and what I'd done and what it cost. And if that's damnation, then maybe damnation is just another word for truth, for accountability, for finally being honest about who you are and what you've done and accepting the consequences, for stopping the lies and the hiding and the pretending and just facing reality, however painful, for choosing courage over comfort, truth over lies, accountability over avoidance. I can live with that. In fact, for the first time in 8 years, I'm actually living instead of just existing in a prison of my own making. My actual prison cell is 8 by 10 feet with bars on the door and a view of nothing but concrete and fencing. But I'm freer than I was in my luxury apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, freer than I was in my corner office at Hartman and Associates, freer than I've been since I made that terrible choice 8 years ago. Because freedom isn't about where your body is. It's about whether you're honest about who you are and what you've done. And for the first time in 8 years, I am. I'm Andrew Kane, former attorney, current prisoner, someone who destroyed lives through cowardice and is trying, however inadequately, to pay what he owes. I'm a man who met the devil or hallucinated him or experienced some profound psychological break that manifested as a supernatural encounter. I'm someone who confessed his sins to Lucifer or to himself or to the universe, and in doing so found not redemption but something more important, truth. And truth, however painful, is the only thing that can save you from the hell you build for yourself. One lie at a time. Truth and accountability and consequences and honesty and the courage to face what you've done and who you've become and let it destroy everything that needs destroying so something real can finally emerge from the ruins. My name is Andrew Kane. I confessed my sins to Lucifer, and whether he was real or not doesn't matter. What matters is that I finally told the truth.